mounting. From the desert, Semitic-speaking tribes moved in about the strong points of the cities. From the north, a terrific assault broke forth in the late 13th century BC. This is also about the time that, around the 1300s BC, was the time when the Dorians invaded Greece. At least some of these invaders spoke Indo-European languages and presumably came from the Great Plains of Eurasia, but in the course of their advance they set many other tribes in motion. In some areas, including Asia Minor and Greece, the civilized states which had existed in the second millennium BC were wiped out. Many Syrian cities were burned and destroyed forever. This is in the 1200s, the 1300s BC. The oldest centers of civilization in Egypt and Mesopotamia barely rode out the storm but were seriously weakened. 1812 overture, I believe, in the background. It's definitely Tchaikovsky. The fight against the enemies of civilization, the fight against barbarians who would destroy civilization for whatever reason, has gone on and on, hasn't it? A dark age before Greece even came to be anything important. A dark age in the 1200s, and then the awakening finally in around the 700s BC. Long dark age there. And you're not out of it yet. About 1400 years later, 600 AD, another dark age falls on the world, on the Roman Empire. Didn't take all of the area in the Middle East into it, which actually remained in the hands of the remnants of Alexander the Great's empire, and a bit of Greek influence stayed there even during the Dark Age, the Dark Age in Europe. So I guess they had their Dark Age in the 1300s, and they've got a Dark Age today. We have to admit that, don't we? The Middle East is in a Dark Age today. But for those of you who think that there was one Dark Age where civilization faltered for a while, no. It's always someone's hammering, someone's eating away at the roots of civilization. It's a Russian proverb I heard from Ayn Rand in an interview or something. She says, the pig who's rooting around at the bottom of the tree and is destroying the roots and stuff. I said, if you would lift your snout up out of the dirt, you'd see that you're destroying the tree that is dropping the apples that you're eating. And that's kind of how people who destroy civilization are. They've got a new way, it's better, they're going to pray every day and stuff. Well, okay, but that's going to bring disease and starvation. It's going to mean an end to sanitation. It's going to mean that this world doesn't matter. So be it. But we should pray, though. This is what you get. The enemies of civilization are like pigs with their nose in the dirt who don't look up and see the tree that they're damaging and killing. Alright. Well, that was an interesting sidebar, huh? Okay, end of an era. The Dark Age comes to a close. Even in those, descends. Even in those areas which clung to civilization, the period from 1200 to 900 BC is a dim and dreary one. The kings, warlords, and priests could no longer erect great buildings and patronize the arts. Earlier there had been preliminary tendencies to link together the main parts of the Near East economically and culturally, but now life was concentrated in tiny local units. Sounds identical to the Dark Age in Europe and in Greece. Every so often civilization seems to work itself into a corner from which further progress is virtually impossible along the lines then apparent. If new ideas are to have a chance, the old system of thought must be so severely shaken that they lose their dominance. Now, that's a description of the Dark Age ending in Europe. This is a description of the ancient Near East, but that could describe the end of the Dark Age in Europe. Catholic Church had been dominant for so long, and no new ideas were allowed. Look at the Protestants, who just wanted to be able to read the Bible and pray their own way and not pray in Latin. They killed 3/4 of the people in Germany in the wars fighting about that kind of stuff. So, sometimes the ideas are cemented in such a way you've got to destroy the old way. this idea of multiculturalism and everybody loves everybody's culture and we're all equal is nonsense. It's not going to fly. Sometimes there's cultures that need to exist only in books. If new ideas are to have a chance, the old system... Oh, okay. 2 such major collapses occurred in ancient times, one at the end of the Roman Empire in Western Europe during the 5th century after Christ. Now there's the catch, is that's where he was going with that. He was saying that they had to shake the old Roman ways to get a new way of life. And I'm saying they had to shake apart the medieval dictatorship of the Pope to get the Renaissance. 2 slightly different interpretations of his comparison. The other collapse was at the end of the 2nd millennium BC. In these dismal periods, the 1200s and so. In these dismal periods, many areas reverted to the food-raising stage of agricultural villages as the civilized superstructure was destroyed. Yet the experience of both eras would suggest that civilization is a tough, enduring pattern of human life. Men did not everywhere abandon the major concepts which made them civilized, and when conditions became more stable, they now proceeded to advance on new lines which were yet firmly grounded on the inheritance of the past. Alright, on to a bit about art in Mesopotamia. The lower regions along the great rivers, Sumer and Akkad, did not have good stone easily available, so the Sumerians built in brick, either baked or mud brick. Such a material resulted in heavy, massive architecture in which true arches were used for the first time in history. I guess it just didn't stick as a technology. People just weren't convinced by it because it took the Romans to really bring the arch to its triumphal arch? No, sorry about that. To vary the ugly brick surfaces of their temples, the Sumerians recessed parts of the facade and added semi-columns on the other parts. They also rammed collared terracotta cones into the walls to form abstract decorations. It's kind of like a nail made of clay, baked different colors and stuff. It's sort of like a nail, but it's a cone, and just hammer that in, a bunch of them, into the brick facade. Let's see, they also rammed... Mesopotamian temples grew larger over the centuries, but they never developed into great works of architecture. So says the artist, there are surely some modern boneheads who would say that that architecture was just as good as the Greeks. It showed certain childish things, childishness, like dwarfing the human form and stuff like that, you know. Alright, skipping a few pages, probably the greatest achievements of Mesopotamian artists were in working metal. Many of their technical skills in handling thin gold plate or inlaying stones into metal were borrowed by later craftsmen. Unfortunately, gold and bronze objects were usually melted down in subsequent ages to provide raw material for new creations. Pause for a second. That's why a lot of the stuff we have came from grave sites and stuff. Things that hadn't been found have been buried. We don't have a lot of treasures that have been handed down generation to generation. At some point somebody melts the stuff down to provide raw material for new creations, but archaeologists have made some remarkable finds. One of the greatest is the Royal Cemetery at Ur, U-R, where a queen, her attendants, horses, and wagons were buried about 2500 BC in great pomp with a wealth of delicate jewelry and other luxuries. We have a little bit of information, I won't go over that here, it's in the engineering series, a little information about the quality of the wagons and how they solve different problems on the wagons. We know about this because they actually buried some and gave to us. In making seals out of metal, or more often stone, Mesopotamian carvers also became... A seal is the thing you roll over the clay lump to put your signature. The carvers also became very skillful and created a great variety of representation of animals, plants, and imaginary monsters. Any modern student who looks at a wide sample of Mesopotamian seals will feel that this was a very different world filled with fantasies and fears. Quite a different view of what was going on. Now we will go to the arts of Egypt.